marble foyer, casting fractured rainbows across walls that had never heard laughter. Catherine Moretti stood with her single battered suitcase, her hands trembling slightly as the butler's disapproving gaze swept over her worn shoes and second-hand coat. She was 23 years old, carrying a nursing degree she couldn't afford to complete and debts that followed her like shadows. The job posting had been simple. Live-in maid for the Winchester estate, room and board included, salary generous enough to save her drowning family. What it hadn't mentioned was the silence that hung over this mansion like a shroud, or the boy in the wheelchair who sat motionless by the window, staring at nothing. "The master will see you now," the butler intoned, and Catherine followed him through corridors that smelled of expensive emptiness and old grief. James Winchester III sat behind a desk that probably cost more than Catherine's childhood home. At 42, he still carried the sharp-featured handsomeness of old money, but his eyes were hollows, and his shoulders curved inward as though protecting a wound that never healed. He barely looked up when she entered. "You understand the position?" he asked, his voice flat. "General household duties. My son requires no special attention. We have nurses for that. You'll clean, cook when the chef is off, and maintain discretion about our family affairs. Can you do that?" Catherine hesitated. In that pause, she heard something that made her stomach clench, a crash from somewhere above, followed by shouting, then nothing. James Winchester didn't even flinch. "Your son," she began carefully, the posting mentioned. "My son is not your concern." The words came out like a blade. "He has every medical professional money can buy. What he doesn't need is another person trying to fix what can't be fixed. Do we understand each other?" Catherine should have agreed. She needed this job desperately. Her mother's medical bills were crushing them. Her younger sister's college fund had been raided to pay for treatments that hadn't worked. This salary could save them all. But she'd spent 3 years in nursing school before the money ran out, and she'd learned to hear what people didn't say. In James Winchester's rigid control, she heard terror. In his dismissal of his son, she heard unbearable guilt. "I understand," she said quietly, which wasn't quite a lie. She met Ethan Winchester on her 3rd day. She'd been cleaning the library when she heard the soft whir of an electric wheelchair. He appeared in the doorway like a ghost, 12 years old, with his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes, which Catherine knew only from the portraits that lined the stairs. Margaret Winchester had died 4 years ago. Everyone in town knew the story, whispered it in grocery stores and coffee shops with that particular tone reserved for tragedies involving the wealthy. The accident had killed Margaret instantly. Ethan had survived, but the spinal injury left him paralyzed from the waist down. "That's what the doctors said. That's what everyone believed." "You're new," Ethan said. His voice was soft, carefully neutral, the voice of someone who'd learned not to hope for anything. "I'm Catherine. Cat, if you prefer. They usually don't last long." "The new people," he said it without accusation, just stating a fact. "My dad fires them, or they quit. Last one made it 6 weeks. Catherine sat down on the arm of a leather chair, making herself level with his gaze. Up close, she could see the tightness around his eyes, the way his hands gripped the wheelchair arms even when sitting still. "Why do they leave?" Ethan shrugged, a gesture that seemed to carry the weight of years. "Dad doesn't want anyone bothering me. The nurses aren't allowed to talk to me except about medical stuff. The tutors teach from a script. Everyone acts like I'm made of glass." He paused. "Or like I'm already gone." The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. She'd seen it in nursing school, patients who received every medical intervention but no human connection, who were treated as collections of symptoms rather than people. It was efficient. It was also a kind of death. "What do you want?" she asked. Ethan blinked, confused. "What? If you could have anything right now, what would it be?" He stared at her as though she'd spoken a foreign language. Then, slowly, something shifted in his face, a crack in the careful blankness. "I want to go outside," he whispered. "Really outside, not just the terrace. I want to feel grass. I want to go to the creek at the edge of the property. Before the accident, Mom used to take me there. We'd catch tadpoles and build forts from fallen branches." His voice broke slightly. "I dream about it sometimes. The sound of the water. The way the sunlight came through the trees." Catherine made her decision in that moment, knowing it might cost her everything. "Tomorrow," she said, After your father leaves for the office. I'll take you. She expected joy, but what she saw was fear. The path isn't paved, Ethan said. The wheelchair can't. Then we'll figure it out. That night, Catherine researched all-terrain wheelchairs and found nothing in the Winchester garage except medical equipment that looked barely used. She discovered something else, though, while putting away laundry in Ethan's room. Hidden under his bed were physical therapy logs from 2 years ago, marked with notes in a frustrated hand. Patient shows no motivation. Refuses exercises. Recommend psychiatric evaluation. But there were older logs too, from right after the accident. Patient demonstrates strong will. Pain tolerance high, showing early signs of potential mobility recovery with intensive therapy. Something had changed. Something had broken in Ethan that had nothing to do with his spine. She found James Winchester in his study at midnight, working through papers with the mechanical determination of a man avoiding sleep. Mr. Winchester, I need to ask you something about Ethan. His jaw tightened. I told you. Why did he stop trying? The question landed like a stone in still water. James's face went white, then red, then carefully blank. That's not your business. He told me he wants to go to the creek. The place he used to go with his mother. James stood abruptly, knocking papers to the floor. Don't you dare bring her into this. Catherine held her ground, even as her heart hammered. Mr. Winchester, I read his physical therapy logs. 2 years ago he just stopped. The doctors said he lost motivation, but that's not it, is it? Something happened. The silence stretched so long she thought he might fire her on the spot. Then James Winchester did something she suspected he rarely did. He collapsed back into his chair and told the truth. It was my fault, he said, his voice barely